22 to 24 hours a day with no meaningful social contact. Some of them, just like this one, are actually double cells. There's 2 people in it. And see, some people say, well, how in the world can that be solitary? Well, most people actually would say that's much, much worse. If you've ever lived with anybody in like a 1-bedroom apartment, you've like, let me get away from this person for a few minutes. I have to take a walk. I have to go stand in another room. If you're in a cell 24 hours a day with another person, you never get any privacy. One guy's lying taking a nap, the other guy's going to the bathroom right next to his head. That's the level of intimacy you're stuck with when you're in a cell like this with 2 people. And when you're there all by yourself, you have nothing to do all day long. Some of these guys have TVs, great, they can sit there and watch TV all day long, mind-deadening guys. But one of the first things they take away if you violate your rules once you get to solitary is your TV. If you can read, great, you can read books. Try reading a book for 24 hours a day for 2 or 3 days with nothing else to do. But what do you do if you aren't literate? There are definitely people who spend 22 to 24 hours a day in these cells with a cellmate who don't read and don't have TVs. I met one down in Nard, lived in a cell just like this with a closed front door with another man. I said, what do you do all day long? I lie in my bed. What else do you do all day? I get up and I look out the window and see whether or not somebody's walking by in the hall. And if they're not, I lie in the bed. He has bed sores. He spends so long lying in his bed, he has bed sores. This is somebody who's seriously mentally ill, is never going to get out. He has 30 more years to do in solitary. 30 more years. As somebody told me, a psychologist said, that's like giving your 5-year-old a timeout until they're 20. It doesn't make any sense. It's torture to people. The United Nations has said if we keep people in solitary more than 15 days, it begins to destroy their minds and should be considered torture. In the state of Illinois, we have 3,000 people in solitary, 3,000 out of the 30-some thousand people, so almost 10%. They're not getting better, they're getting worse. This literally destroys people's minds, and that effect doesn't end when they walk out the door. Years later, we at the Law Center continue to do Social Security disability as well as fight for prisoners' rights. Unfortunately, a lot of these guys getting out are disabled, so we get them Social Security disability. Great, we can give them disability, but they may never work again. The Uptown People's Law Center has been fighting solitary in one form or another ever since I started working there in 1981. Whether it's access to the courts, whether it's the Supermax prison, which thank goodness is now closed in Illinois. We do not have a Supermax prison. Woo! Yay! After a decade and a half of fighting it. But there are people who want to reopen even that. So we never actually can rest on our laurels. There are people right now in the legislature who are pushing to fund and reopen it. And remember, that's a $90,000 a year to keep somebody in one of those little cells down in Supermax prison, and this is a state where we're cutting mental health care, cutting everything else. So it's the worst idea ever. The other thing I want to make clear is that the people who go to solitary, or put in solitary, if you read the newspapers, you would think it was just murderers, rapists, the really, really terrible people that can't be controlled anywhere else. In fact, you can go into a cell like this for 30, 60, 90 days for little things like rolling your eyes at a guard, called insolence. For walking out of the dining hall with a cookie instead of finishing the dining hall. It's called contraband. Those kinds of things will get you put in solitary. And once you're there, if you start going crazy and kicking on the wall, they'll give you a disciplinary report for dangerous disturbance or for destroying state property. And many people who don't have mental illness when they go in have one by the time they go out. Those who have mental illnesses when they go in may never get out because they'll just keep deteriorating. Maybe they'll only get 30, 60 days at a time, but it'll keep going and going and going, and they may be there forever. And that's how this guy ended up with 30 years in solitary. Not because he got all at once. What he describes is, I feel the walls collapsing on me. So I lash out. And every time I lash out, they give me another disciplinary report. And they give me another year in solitary for lashing out. This country has simply made a huge error. We decided back in the mid-70s that we were going to treat crime, which really meant drugs, as a criminal offense and lock people up. And we're going to smash them into tiny little prisons and give them nothing to do. They started acting out, which we knew. All the psychological literature says, put people in a confined space, don't give them anything else to do, tensions will rise, they'll start fighting each other. That's what happened in our prisons. Did we say we made a big mistake? No. We doubled down and said we have really bad people in prison, so let's make it even more secure. And it got worse and worse. And finally, we built supermax prisons where people never have any contact with anybody else. So no, they don't attack each other anymore because they're never around another person. Instead, they turn that violence inwards and they begin to eat themselves up. We have to rewind the clock. Other countries in the world don't do this. We're the only country in the world that keeps this number of people in these kind of conditions. We're the only one. Everybody else believes this is torture. We have not only more prisoners than anybody else in the world, but more people in solitary than any other country in the entire world. Wind back the clock, abandon this failed experiment, and have a prison system